The year was not officially agreed upon anymore. Some records called it 2194. Others said 2201. But most people in the lower and mid-districts simply stopped counting. Time didn't feel like something that moved forward in Neon Arc City anymore. It felt layered, like the city itself had built over its own history so many times that the past had become something buried beneath light and concrete. What mattered now was not the year. It was the district you lived in, and whether or not you could afford to stay there. Even the idea of ground level had become meaningless in Neon Arc City. There was no bottom anymore, only lower layers. And those lower layers were still alive in their own way. Subway systems ran through hollowed-out industrial bones of old city grids. Entire neighborhoods existed in the shadows of infrastructure that had been repurposed so many times no one remembered what it originally was. Some people said the city was growing upward. Others said it was collapsing upward. Either way, it never stopped changing shape. Orion Vale lived somewhere most maps stopped bothering to label clearly. The Upper Growth Belt, a collection of suspended districts built into engineered canopy systems above Neon Arc City. Enormous tree-like structures, part biological, part industrial, stretched upward into the clouds. They didn't just hold homes, they held entire forgotten micro-civilizations. People who lived their whole lives without ever touching street level. People who had never seen real soil except through glass containers or corporate displays. The sky trees weren't natural. They were grown, maintained, and regulated like infrastructure. But over time, they stopped feeling artificial. They just became life. Orion's section of the upper growth belt was quieter than most. Less traffic, less corporate oversight, more abandoned pathways between branches that no longer served official purposes. Sometimes he would walk those pathways just to hear the sound of his own footsteps on old engineered wood. Below him, the city pulsed endlessly. Above him, clouds moved slowly, like they were thinking. And somewhere in between, he lived. His home wasn't a building in the traditional sense. It was a van, but even calling it that felt outdated. It had stopped being a vehicle a long time ago. It was more like a room that could move if it ever needed to. It rested inside a wooden treehouse platform high above the city. The tree itself was massive, reinforced with synthetic fibers and living bark, grown and engineered to support entire neighborhoods in the sky. Its branches held walkways, hanging lights, maintenance cables, and small homes built into knots of wood like hidden memories. At night, the entire structure looked alive, softly glowing, breathing, almost watching, enjoying the view and the freedom from the hustle. Rain never really stopped in this part of the city, but it wasn't weather anymore. It was background noise, a constant emotional texture that shaped everything. Sometimes it was heavier, sometimes it was just mist, but it always returned. And Orion had stopped noticing it as something separate from silence. It was peaceful, a part of his world, and he liked it that way. He found himself missing it when it was gone, eagerly awaiting its return. Inside the van, everything had evolved around survival and repetition. The worn blanket wasn't just comfort, it was memory. The cooking unit wasn't just utility, it was routine. The route maps weren't just navigation. They were proof that the world outside still had order, even if fragile. There were scratches on the metal walls from years of equipment shifting during storms. Small repairs layered over older repairs. Nothing in the van was new, but everything still worked. Life in the treehouse wasn't the most posh or glamorous, but it had charm. It was genuine, and in Neon Arc City, that was enough. A soft mechanical sound broke the quiet. From beneath the passenger seat, blue indicator lights flickered on. Then, movement. A shape unfolded itself from the storage compartment. Not aggressive, not fast, careful, like something waking up in a place it already knew. A robotic dog stepped into view. Its design was minimalistic but expressive, built not to imitate life, but to coexist with it. Good evening, Orion Vale. Evening, Kairo. There was something about Kairo's voice that always made silence feel organized, like even quiet had structure when he was speaking. You have been stationary for 6 hours and 42 minutes. Sounds about right. Was rest achieved? Not really. That is consistent with your previous 14 nights. Yeah, don't start with that again. Orion drank a cup of coffee as he watched Neon Arc City stretch endlessly downward from his window. But downward was more conceptual than physical, because every layer of the city had its own version of sky. Lower districts saw neon reflections bouncing off polluted clouds. Mid-districts saw controlled weather grids. Upper districts saw artificial calm skies maintained by corporate atmospheric regulation. Each level believed it was living under the real sky. None of them were wrong. Orion sometimes wondered if people in the lower districts ever looked up and imagined what life was like above them. He wondered if people above ever looked down and felt guilty, or if everyone felt like he did and were just too tired to care anymore. Orion quietly spoke. Everything's stacked, but nobody knows what's holding it up. Structural integrity is maintained by automated systems. Yeah, I figured you'd say that. Orion finally stood. He moved to the side door, paused for a moment longer than necessary, then opened it and stepped out into the night. Cool air drifted in, not fresh, not clean, just different. Like the city had its own temperature depending on where you stood in it. Below the platform, the spiral staircase curved into darkness between branches. The garage was not just a storage space. It was an extension of the tree itself. Wood and metal fused together in a way that felt neither natural nor artificial. It existed somewhere in between. At its center waited the Night Courier Mark III, a flying bike, a modest model, not impressive, not flashy, but reliable. And in Neon Arc City, reliability was rare. "Welp, Kairo, that's us," Orion said, staring down at the small pod attached to the bike where Kairo would sit. Orion placed his hand on the bike's screen, and it came to life. He didn't rush. He never rushed anymore. Rushing implied there was somewhere better to be, and for Orion, well, he only had himself and Kairo. Route Q received. Estimated time of completion, 4 hours. Yeah. Let's get this done. The garage opened into the skyway. Rain didn't fall here. It drifted, carried sideways between structures by slow wind currents and the movement of the city itself. Neon Arc City unfolded around them in endless layers of light. Elevated transit rails shifted silently overhead. Floating platforms adjusted height depending on traffic flow. Entire sections of buildings rotated slowly, like pieces inside some massive machine. Nothing in the city was ever completely still. Even quiet felt engineered. The night Courier Mark III eased into the upper traffic lanes. Soft neon reflections stretched across the rain-covered windshield. Kairo scanned the route beside him. First stop approaching Mid-Lantern District. All right. The Mid-Lantern District always felt warmer than the rest of the city. Lantern holograms drifted between buildings. Steam rose from food stalls beneath elevated walkways. Music echoed softly somewhere below the rain. People still slowed down here sometimes, still sat outside little cafes, still watched the weather. Orion lowered the bike onto a narrow residential platform. Rain drifted through the open gaps between towers while glowing signs reflected across puddles beneath his boots. Kairo scanned quietly. Residential cluster 17B confirmed. Package type, warm meal courier. Easy enough. Orion grabbed the insulated container and walked toward the apartment entrance. A woman opened the door almost immediately. A small child peeked around her leg sleepily.
Courier delivery? Still hot. She smiled faintly as she accepted the meal. Thank you. He refused to sleep until it got here. The little boy waved shyly. Orion nodded once before stepping back into the rain. Back on the bike, they lifted quietly into the skyway again. For a while, neither of them spoke. The city stretched endlessly around them, layer after layer, disappearing into fog and neon light. You ever think about how many people are awake right now? Current city estimates suggest approximately 41 million active residents. No, I mean really awake. Kairo processed for a moment. Clarification unavailable. Orion smiled faintly. Yeah, fair enough. The next district was quieter. Small rooftop cafes glowed softly through the rain. Old music drifted from somewhere beneath the transit rails. People sat under heated awnings drinking tea while storms moved through the skyline. For a moment, Orion imagined staying somewhere long enough to know the people there. But the route marker flashed again. Another stop. Another delivery. Second destination approaching. This stop was a small repair shop tucked beneath an elevated rail line. An older mechanic looked up from a workbench as Orion entered. Tools and old drone parts covered the walls. You couriers still working nights out there? Somebody has to. The mechanic laughed softly as Orion handed over the package. Replacement parts, heating system components, nothing unusual. City keeps getting colder. Yeah, well, it's also fall. I guess so, son. You heading back up after this? Eventually. The mechanic nodded knowingly. Long as you've got somewhere to head back to. You be careful now, you hear? Outside, the rain continued drifting through the glow of the city. Orion climbed slowly back on the bike. Kairo looked toward him. Emotional state appears stabilized. Maybe I just need some air. You are currently surrounded by air, sir. Orion laughed quietly under his breath. Time passed slowly after that. Deliveries blurred together into soft pieces of city life. Warm meals delivered to late-night workers. Medicine left outside quiet apartment doors. Small packages carried between districts that never fully slept. And through all of it, the rain never stopped.
Eventually, the route queue emptied. All scheduled deliveries completed. Orion exhaled softly. Whew, good. The bike rose higher through the upper skyways. The louder districts slowly faded below them. Neon became softer here, dimmer, calmer. Soon, the enormous sky trees of the upper growth belt appeared through the mist. Warm lantern lights glowed between branches. Hidden walkways stretched quietly through the rain. Home. The night courier settled back into the garage platform. The engine powered down into silence. For the first time all night, nothing moved except the rain. Kairo stepped from the sidecar. Mission complete. Yeah, another night down. Inside the van, warmth greeted them again. Soft amber lighting, rain against the roof, the familiar quiet hum of old systems running gently in the background. Kairo curled beside the passenger seat charging dock. Orion sank slowly into the worn couch near the window. Outside, neon Arc City continued glowing endlessly beneath the storm. Still awake, still moving, still alive. But up here in the trees, things felt quieter, smaller somehow, manageable. Good night, Kairo, and thanks for the company. Happy to help, and good night, Orion. Sleep came easier above the city, even if neon Arc City itself never truly slept. For now came only the sound of gentle rain and thunder. A deep and peaceful sleep would follow.